There's a lot of pushback from the judges on, I think one of them said, I'm not sure entirely what you're trying to argue here. There's some concern about the unenumerated part of this. That's not explicitly spelled out in the Constitution. Can you just explain, why you think it should be right, even if the drafters of the Constitution didn't put it in there?
Well, I really think the concept of a fair election is as fundamental as you get in our system of government. I mean, if you don't have fair elections, then the whole legitimacy of government starts to crumble. And so I think I said this when we first filed it. Justice Mike Morgan asked Phil Strack at Harper 3, I know it's not specifically in the Constitution, but do the people have a right to fair elections? And I felt like Phil danced all over the courtroom and never answered it. And I'm still not 100% sure what they think, but I think if you ask people across the state of all sorts of political persuasions, they're going to say, well, yeah, of course I got a right to fair elections. And so that's the first question that we think needs to be answered, and then given a chance to present the evidence, which we think we know what it will show, but since it was done in secret, it's hard to discern exactly what they used.
I wanted to ask about that evidence. So I know there was some pushback from Strack saying he was saying you wanted to be able to take discovery in this case and find what was wrong. But what would the evidence bring about to you?
Well, I should have brought quotes from all of the reporters who, in writing articles about these various districts, just have said, well, they were gerrymandered to make sure that Republicans won these particular races. And you look at the facts. You had 3 congressional districts in which Democrat incumbents declined to run for re-election, and in the 6th, no Democrat even filed. It was so nicely redrawn or reapportioned. So I think from a pleading standpoint, we put everything out there that we could. We used the Civitas Partisan Index, which I think one of their folks said that I didn't get it quite right, but I mean, they consistently rate districts, and you look at, well, what was the district prior to this reapportionment? What's the district now? And it's clear that there were significant shifts in those districts to favor one party.
Now you said in there that, at least I think if I understood right, that Harper really didn't address the question of whether there is a right to a fair election.
That's correct. That's right. There's nothing in there that addresses fair elections. They talk about fairness in the context of the claims, which was the overall maps and proportionality, and ask very legitimate questions, I think, about, well, do you draw 14 competitive congressional districts, or do you do some, and I understand that. That's obviously not what our claim is about.
Two of the judges kept coming back to, okay, if we've got this right to fair election, what's going to be the standard? How do we set out that something that people can understand?
Well, I think most people understand fairness in terms of the context. And my baseball analogy, one team doesn't start with a 5-run lead, and so then it's merely a product of the evidence that you put on. And there's a high bar with the evidence that you have to show that the government intentionally stacked the decks. Now, if I could bring in all of my reporter friends who have written stories that essentially say, yeah, the government stacked the deck in this district, but I think the evidence clearly demonstrate that. And knowing how they did it, you have these other criteria for redistricting, but you look at the legislation, you don't know what criteria they used. We don't know anything really. I mean, I asked a friend of mine who's a state senator who drew the Senate and congressional maps. He said, we have no idea. And in the House, I think it was an Ohio consultant that was hired. But so, you need discovery. I mean, not a lot of discovery, but but their own redistricting criteria that they passed includes political considerations in election results. So, I mean, maybe that's all they used. I don't know. But that's enough to say, you know, here's what it was before, here's what it was afterwards. Was this intentionally done to create a partisan advantage? And if it was, I just don't think it's I don't think it constitutes a fair election.
How do you make that dovetail though with the statement from in Harper 6 that basically that partisan gerrymandering is okay?
Well, you have to look at how they define partisan gerrymandering, and consistently going all the way back to Justice O'Connor, I can't remember, maybe it was Gaffney or one of those cases, saying, well, it's all about proportionality. You know, the challenging party, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, were saying, well, we're a 50-50 state, so we're entitled to at least 50% of the congressional seats or 50% of the state house seats. And, you know, the court completely rejected that. But that's not what we're asking for. And you know, and I understand that fairness is hard to utilize in that kind of circumstance, but that's not what we're claiming. You know, we're saying this is a discrete election, and you know, everything gets all wrapped up in the maps and the map drawing, but it's really about, you know, 14 separate districts and 14 separate elections for Congress and 120 for state house. So it's just an entirely different case.